Let's go around the room and tell us for the record. We'll start with you, Pete.
Pete Peterson, Assembly.
Amy DeBosky, Suzanne France.
Felix Rivera, Christopher Constant.
Dick Training.
Lance Wilbur.
Marilyn Bonzo.
Dean James.
Okay. And Eric's on his way back. He went over to get a letter for us to sign, at least for Amy to sign. Yes, ma'am.
Is John on the phone, or is he down?
John, are you on the phone? Is the phone connected, man? It is open? Okay. No, I guess not. Good question. So Lance, the mayor's here. So Lance, you want to lead this off, or Mayor, do you want to start?
It's best if I don't speak.
Okay, I agree. Go ahead, Lance.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Assembly. So today our work session is going to be on the proposed revisions to the approved 2018 operating budget. We laid on the table AR 2018-109, an accompanying AM, and the proposed documents for adjusting the mill levy. So we're going to spend our next 20 minutes kind of reviewing all of those things. Before I get started, I'm going to start off by basically saying what you're going to see in this proposed adjustment is that total property taxes are going to be going down about 0.5%. The total assessed values that we use when we calculate the mill levy, we have new information from the approved, they're down about 4.4%. So combinations of things, there's a lot of moving parts in this. And again, the result of all of the changes that we're proposing in here, based on the approved voters for the $50,000 property tax exemption, the average homeowner for a $350,000 house is going to see a reduction of about $275,000, and I'm going to detail that a little bit more at the end, and we'll also going through these. So with that, let me just not end the show and do that. Before we get started, just the next couple slides here, I just want to remind the Assembly, and hopefully you all have copies of the presentation. I'm going to remind the Assembly of what we had in 2018, and then we'll talk a little bit of detail about what the changes are in 1Q. In 2018, the administration, with the Assembly's support, we built a budget that was really focused on public safety, economic development, and homelessness. This proposed change budget does not adjust any of those primary focus areas, so we're not seeing any significant changes in those continued priorities. So again, we have mentioned that we've increased our police force, and a lot of changes have been made, a lot of positive progress there. Again, reminding the things that we faced when we built 2018, our health care costs were up. Our labor, as a result of the agreements that we have, they were also up, and the SAP costs was a combination of support for SAP and the repayment of those things. Those continue to be the same. In the 2018 1Q budget, we're not making any adjustments to health care. We are going to make some adjustments to labor, but mostly as it relates to position count. We'll talk about that, and no changes to SAP at this time. And then we did add, additionally, when we built 2018, as you recall, we added about $2 million for academies and for APD and the fire department. And talking to the Chief LeBlanc yesterday, they just had an academy graduate, and they're going to be looking to start one later this year in September, so things are moving along there. Snowplow, again, this $500,000 is in 2018. It'll be interesting to see how 17 closes, because to see if they actually spent all they had in 17. Homelessness, vote by mail. We added $300,000 in vote by mail, and I think members of the Assembly pointed out, and kudos to Barbara and her staff to make I think a successful vote by mail. The Assembly and this proposed budget is asking for a little bit more money, lessons they've learned, things they want to adjust and fix, so we're going to try to accommodate those things in here. And then code abatement.
For a split second. We've been joined by Mr. Dyson, Fred, and Mr. Croft. I mentioned you earlier, Eric, you've gone back to your office. Would you make sure, Rose, he gets a copy of the handout? Keep going, Lance. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Recognize Fred.
And then when we built 18, in order to create a balanced budget, we did make some reductions in departments and in positions. And I'll talk about some slight adjustments in that. And then, again, the certificate of participation, we made some adjustments on how we're supporting and financing that program. So the next slide, slide 6, this is an illustration of historically what we have done when we bring forward to the when the administration brings forward to the Assembly proposed adjustments. In 2015, we added a little more than $9 million, a little less than that in 2016, even a little less than that in 2017. In this proposed budget, the total budget amount is proposed to be about $4.7 million less, and that is made up of two primary things. One of them is we have positions in the department that we are now going to charge directly to the capital program instead of showing them in the operating budget. And then we have some additions that we'll talk about. And again, I'll talk a little bit about both of those in a little more detail. The other thing that we normally do at this time of the year is we actually have the previous year closed. And when we close the previous year, in this case 2017, 2017 is not closed yet. I mentioned this to the Budget and Finance Committee last week or the week before. And any resources that we might have for the prior year close, that's basically what we would call unrestricted fund balance, assuming that we also have our 10 and our 2 met, and then we apply that. This budget does not apply any of that because the money is not known yet. We don't know if it's plus or minus. The estimate that I have right now is it could be the end of May, potentially in June. When we have that number, if the administration and the Assembly want to entertain supplementals beyond what we're proposing here, that would probably be the best approach to do it. And you could put the money in savings, you could put the money to programs, but right now this 2018 budget does not include any revenues or unexpended budget from 2017.
So, Lance, we do not know what fund balance is going to end up at?
We do not.
Is that because of SAP?
In part, yes. Okay.
Questions from Assembly members at this point? Amy?
This is new territory for all of us because we typically know these numbers by now.
We do.
So I'm having a little bit of a moment. Do we anticipate there's going to be a fund balance?
I do not know.
Or could we have a deficit?
So I think, Assemblymember Dembowski, I think we are going to be very close. And here's why I say that. I know that some departments are underspent. I think that basically maintenance and operations will likely be underspent because we didn't get as much snow. I know that finance will be overspent because of overtime and payroll. The departments that are typically in trouble and the big ones are police and fire. Fire looks very good. I think fire is going to make budget for the first time in a long time. The police department may be over a little bit, but it will be because they were, and when Mr. Falsey was here and he was giving the illustration about overpayments and underpayments in SAP, when those come in, so their labor budget may be over maybe $300,000, but I know that Orrin and the chief and our crew are working to figure out what we can do to close that so they're not over budget. I think it's going to be close, honestly.
Can you restate for me, because I just want to make sure I heard it correctly. When do you think we are going to have the actual final numbers for 2017?
The earliest we will have them will be the end of May. That's based on the information I have from the CFO and the progress they're making there. So they have to close. They have to close the 13th month. They have to close the 14th month. You're familiar with this process, and that's basically when we know. Through the 13th month and into the 14th month, once we get that done, any effect of the closing the books that will affect fund balance will be known. There may be some adjustments for utilities that aren't done. Whatever that is, that might not be done, but that will not affect the amount of the fund balance to general government. And again, Robert and I and OMB and the controller, we're on it diligently because we know that that's important. What's important to us, it's important to you.
Yeah, I mean, this, in my recollection, this is the first time this ever happened.
In mine too. And I mean,
Amy, it is the first time, and I've been here for a little while. Tim?
Yeah, is SAP a big part of this?
mhm.
In terms of expenditures or in terms of?
It's a matter, we're switching our financing system from PeopleSoft to being able to true up the accounting. And in the last 3 months, we're into the accounting process using PeopleSoft. And then for when we get into the early stages of 2018, after December, we know what our revenues are, we know what our expenses are, and we start closing those books. Even into January, we get invoices in December. We have, I mean, they're for that year's cost, but we get them in January, so we need to make sure that they're paid for with 17 revenues, and we need to true that up. And as close as it's getting, that is the part that is not done.
The other thing I would say is we're going to have second quarter coming up, and by the time second quarter gets here, because we can do revisions anytime we want, we'll know with fund balance where we're living at. Just sorry it's not done now. You want to continue, Lance?
Yeah, I think the important thing about this time of year and why we do it this time of year is the fund balance is an important element when we do a budget. This year we don't have it, but the most important thing is that we're truing up any changes from 2018, any revenue adjustments, and we'll talk about those, any surprises. We get new updated information on settlements, and we get new and updated information on assessed valuations. All of those things are required for us to set the mill levy, and the mill levy has to be done by May 1st so we can set the taxes out by the 15th. And so that's why this is one ingredient, as Assemblymember Dembowski points out, that is new to us. Okay. Thank you for pointing that out. The next thing that I want...
You're welcome.
Thank you. No, it does make this task a little bit more challenging and different. So if I can draw your attention to, what slide is this? Slide 7. What I've got here is, and also you should have received in your handout, hopefully you received something that looks like this. This is a detailed line item by line item, and what I'm going to summarize is on this slide here, but this is, let me know if you received it. It should be attached to the AR 2000, to your AR for the budget. 2109 should be on the back side of that. Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is a summary of, and we'll take it sort of page by page. This slide here is a summary of the top page in a nutshell. So if I can draw your attention to the slide, in the hand, and it's also in the handout. So in the revenue, this time of year, we receive any adjustments or changes from public finance, from treasury, from departments. We want to know if there's any true up one way or the other. In a nutshell, the total amount of revenue adjustments that are not property tax related are down about 1.5 million. So not very much. There's a little bit of movement here and there, but very, very little. And I'll go through some of these just to highlight them. The Build America bond, that's something we received from public finance, and I expect that will be an increase in what we had last year. Ambulance fees are up a little bit, and that's based on how 17 ended in the revenues, so we trued that up based on the information that we had from 17. The State of Alaska traffic reimbursement, we think that that's actually going to be up about 145. The important point I want to mention here, because I think it will be of interest to Assembly members, this reimbursement is based on the amount of dividend that we think it's going to be set at. So this reimbursement is based on the dividend being at 1,100. We made no adjustments in our revenues for delinquent fines, delinquent or court fees, or any of those things in the event that the dividend amount would go up. If the dividend amount does go up, then we receive more revenue. This budget takes a conservative approach. It's at 1,100. These numbers are based on the actions for 1,100. When the legislature acts and the governor acts, if we get more, we will see more revenue, we'll appropriate it, then we decide what to do with it. But I want to make that point. Payment in lieu of taxes, again, that's up and down. That's state and federal and a variety of other things. That's up a little bit. And then a blend of a bunch of different things. It's a combination of about $61,000 up. We have some things that are down. Most significantly is MUSA and MISA. MUSA and MISA is down almost 1.6 million. And the primary reason of that is that when the assessed valuations for all across the city goes down, the assessed valuation in which we collect the MUSA and MISA from the utilities goes down. So the amount of money that we would receive from them goes down. So that's, in a nutshell, that's why that number is a lower number. A couple other things, room tax, based on the information we got from Treasury, we're taking a little bit of hit there. The Sullivan Arena delinquent taxes and others. The Sullivan Arena number, I know that's of interest to you. On the detail, you'll see that number's about 40,000 of the 250. I was talking to Chris Schuette's staff, and one of the things that I believe the Assembly requested or directed, which was an audit of the Sullivan Arena to find out how they're doing. That audit should be due very, very soon. And that will then tell us whether or not the 40,000 is the right number or will it need to be adjusted. So we're keeping an eye on that. And then tax anticipation notes and the other, just a little bit of things here and there, tobacco tax, and then so no changes in the other calculations that we have. So those are the situations with our adjustments to revenue, pluses and minuses all across the board, but not a big swing.
Mr. Constant.
Where does the motor fuels tax play into this?
So the motor fuels tax will probably be, well, motor fuels tax is,
You should know the first one should be beginning of the second quarter.
yeah. Where's no?
And then going effective in March.
Well, where is it? You're thinking of gas tax, Chris?
Well, if you talk to Dick, it's the motor fuels tax.
It does both diesel and gasoline.
Right,
so
right,
it's
right.
motor fuel tax. Right? It's by the mayor's best attempt to call the gasoline tax.
We projected down
Sorry, Ethan.
66.
Yeah, so, yeah, so it's on the AM support. It's projected to be down a little bit. The interesting thing about this one is the projection is based on 2 months of data. And it's $11.7 million. So the Treasury Department prides themselves and try to keep on top of that and be exact. That's their projection. Based on the first 2 months, they think at the end of the year will be $66,000 away from almost $12 million. So trying to put it.
Just a side note, I was in Wasilla, and they're charging just as much up there as we pay here. I was on base, they're charging just as much as we're paying here. And that all goes to profit for them. Yes, Eric?
Maybe it was Chris, maybe not, but it's mine, I guess. Why isn't that going up? We increased it, so why is it going up?
So I'd have to ask I will ask the municipal treasurer on what they're using on their forecast.
And the same thing on the tobacco tax. For that small a tax, that's a pretty big difference. So are people not smoking enough?
Again, that's not marijuana, that's cigarettes.
Right. We need
So-
to do something about that.
America, the tobacco tax was designed to bring money in and also reduce the amount of tobacco, so we win either way. Go ahead, Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if I can turn your attention, if you want to do two things, if you want to follow along. If you look at page 2 or make a note on this slide, this is a summary of page 2 of your AM support. So we have things that, some items that we're proposing to be added in. So, and I just put them not in priority order, but value order. The citywide Microsoft license agreement for upgrading the software and security and all of the things that are required for upgrading our Microsoft license. We have a 3-year contract. I believe this is the 3rd year of that 3-year contract. I'll confirm that with IT. And we signed this agreement, I believe, in 2015. But in order to maintain the licenses, this number here is being proposed to be added in here. We had a number when we built 18, but we were trying to find out if we could do something different for the agreement and then the total count of desktops. So payable interest, we have to, that's a debt that we have. Litigation, we're putting $500,000 in the police department for litigation that we know that we're going to have continuing, so you'll see that. Voter approved bond, O&M, so this is from last April, about $346,000. We'll add that in. Payroll support, what you'll see in here is you'll see 3 items for payroll. One is 2 positions to support payroll, and then about $103,000 in overtime for the sum of almost $300,000 in support of payroll. Vote by mail, again, I mentioned that one, so additional increase in vote by mail. We received a request from the Assembly Office to do a study of the school district's basically base allocation formula. That would be something that could be accommodated or done with ICER as it's proposed, so that's about $145.
Can I stop you for a second?
Sure.
Rose and I met with the ICER people, and we told them what we want them to look at, and that's what we're doing now. And I talked to one of our colleagues, used to be on the school board, Harriet, and she was on the summit with us. Anyway, she said this would be very useful next year. It's too late in the year now. It would be very useful next year when they're doing the computation on assistance to the schools to have actual good numbers, because the numbers they use are 15 years old. So, yes, Amy.
So let me ask you a question. So let me understand. So we're asking ICER to do a study on ASD's BSA.
What the study does, the study is it's a formula they use when they're figuring out the allocation to the cities. We don't know whether this is going to go down or up.
Right.
But the study hasn't been done in 15 years, and nothing's static.
So I'm questioning, why isn't the school district paying for it? Why are we
Because they don't have the money, so I bring it forward for us to do it. There's our town. That's the reason I've got in here.
Oh, there's no question, but they have a budget that's twice as big as ours.
Yes, but they've got restrictions on where they can spend their money. We're just trying to help them out.
This is on the base student, or in the cost factors in the base student allocation, whether we're still the lowest, cheapest place in the state. We should be considered the cheapest place.
Should this have been done? Yes, but the state didn't do it. The state's not going to do it. So it's worth the money if you take a look at it to get it done. Anyway, let's go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So moving along here, stormwater utility. So basically what this one is the completion of phase 1 and the initiation of phase 2 for the stormwater utility. We have some various labor adjustments. I just put them all in one. $50,000 for an additional City Hall security staff. The Office of Equal Opportunity. They've made some staff changes there, and the people that they now have in there would require an increase of about $17,000. They literally have no other non-labor or anywhere else to suck it up, so we made an adjustment there. Transportation inspection. This is the net effect of what we do in Eric's office, Eric Musser's office. So basically the budget will be reduced by $10,000. The result will be Eric will have an assistant, and then 1 half-time inspector. That will be the effect of this. And then the controller, in order to do what we can to make sure that we get a CAFR reported on time, assuming the state gets to us on time. This is for backfill, so $40,000 for that. GIS funding, this is basically a service that provides mapping for pretty much every department in the municipality and linked with the utilities. We have a variety scattered of lease payments, some work for risk management and safety, and then child care licensing. Pretty small, but they don't have very much non-labor budget. So those are all of the expenses that are being proposed to add. The next
for security, can you break that down for us so every member knows what that means?
Which part?
The security, the increase in security for this building.
Yes, so that's basically one additional personnel inside the lobby right across this, right behind us.
You come through the back door here and the security guard there. We now have another guard on this other end because people are slipping in and going up the stairs. And now that they don't have a bathroom facility over there at the transit center, they're coming in here. So they felt for security it was necessary to have 2 guards, 1 on each side of the doors. Mayor, anything else on this? I don't want to bother your throat.
Well, as I understand it, the facility over at the transit center is very close to being reopened. So that should also change some of the conditions here.
Fred?
I did.
Mr.
Yeah,
Constant?
thanks. On the stormwater utility, in your fine print that's kind of hard to read in the dark, it says that we're carrying forward 90,000 from last year
Mhm.
and asking for an additional 50,000 here. How is that reflected? Because this looks like it's a fresh 141,000.
It's not, I'm just trying to make it very simple on this graphic. It's basically exactly what it is. They have a contract in place and they have $90,000 of that contract unspent.
Right.
So that, we have to give them the spending authority and the budget in 2018 that they currently don't have. And they've asked for $50,000 more.
May I please continue?
Thank you. So the bottom part of this slide is also new. And what we're doing here is that Department of Health and Human Services has a significant amount of people that charge to capital projects. So does transportation planning. They charge directly to FHWA. In PM&E, basically the people that work at PM&E charge to capital projects. They do not charge directly to the tax operating. What we've done in the past is we show $7 million in our operating budget for PM&E, and then in SAP we would do we would then take the money out of that by charging the bonds. What we're going to do here is, instead of having that $7 million for PM&E, it's primarily PM&E, we're going to take those people out of the budget. That's the $7 million. We are not losing position count, but we will not show them inside the budget. It's two reasons why this is being done and not in a particular order. One of them is SAP does not allow us to do what we used to call work authorizations for capital for this purpose. So that's one of the reasons why we do it. The other reason why we do it is we're trying to make sure that we have consistency, that if you're working on a capital project, you're charging directly to the capital project, not walking through an operating budget and then moving the money, then replenishing the operating budget with capital. At the end of the day, PM&E has always been a net zero, but we have to give them budget authority. And now, since they're not in the budget, we don't have to give them that authority. So they're going to charge directly to capital. But when you look at this budget, it's going to look like 40 positions in PM&E coming out of the operating budget. So that's.
Excuse me.
Mr. Dyson?
Yeah. What does PM&E mean?
Thank you, Mr. Project Management and Engineering. Thank you.
I thought it was first was PMS.
No.
And I thought it was preventative maintenance and equipment.
Thank you.
Project management.
Yeah, so this is Jerry Hansen's group.
So the question that I
Chris?
don't want to ask, thank you, Stuart, but I got to ask. So when you go back to the first page, historical adjustments there, and there's
Mhm.
minus 4.74 million. When you put that together with this,
Yep.
then do you get a plus $4 million?
You get a plus 3.
Anything else? Lance, go ahead.
Okay. So this too is new, but necessary. Okay, the next couple slides here, I'm going to give a summary of the 18 to 18-1Q. And this is on the budget side. So the 2018 budget approved, the budget appropriation was $510.8 million. The budget appropriation for 2001Q is 506, and it's a combination of those two big things, basically the $3 million that we added and the $7 million that we took out. Does that make sense? Okay. So for the position count, what you're going to see in the general government operating budget, position count doesn't change from approved. However, in 1Q, we took out 40 positions from PM&E, but we added 2 in payroll. So the net is a negative 38 positions in the operating budget for a total position count in the operating budget down 38. That's why that shows like that. Okay? The total amount of the tax base in approved is 276, and in 1Q it's 284. And the difference for the increase is a combination of the tax cap. We're going to go, when we recalculate the tax cap, we go to the cap. We have settlements. We have adjustments in MUSA and MISA. So when those, remember I mentioned when those things go down by 1.5, the amount of property, because it's inside the tax cap, the amount of property tax collection goes up 1.5. Settlements, that's $2 million. So when those settlements happen, we have to recover those settlements. That adjusts the tax cap. So that's why those things, that's primarily the big adjustment there. And for those of you who are schooled into the tax cap, you'll know the elements that basically we adjust all of those things, and the last thing we do is, as we maintain the tax cap, if there's a gap, that's where the property taxes go up or go down. If we make more revenue and MUSA is more, we get more money in marijuana, we get more money from the state, whatever it is, then the property tax number goes down. In this situation, all of those things are going down, so property tax goes up and we maintain the cap.
Sure.
Yes, Mr. Dyson.
Forgive my ignorance. In the tax cap, I remember you can grow it by population plus inflation. When population goes down, is there a mechanism where you have to lower it? Or is there a ratchet there that keeps it?
You're exactly right. Population and CPI, we use a running 5-year average, and that is part of the overall calculation in the tax cap.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. There's a variety of things. New construction, alcohol,
Please
tobacco.
continue.
Thank you. So, the last slide that I have here is the mill rates. So we set the mill rate basically in April of every year. And what I want to illustrate here is in 2017, based on all of the changes that were made from the 17 budget to the 1Q budget, and then we set the mill rate, it was 8.51. The preliminary mill rate for general government would be 8.83. It would be an increase of about 3.2 or $32. The school district, you can see theirs is up a little bit, an increase of about 31. So the net, or the total, would be under 1Q it was 15.43, goes up to 16. So last year for a $100,000 house, for this general government and the school district, you would have paid $1,500 just straight away. In this scenario, you would pay $1,600 straight away. Now, last year, if you would have had the $20,000 property tax exemption, okay? If you didn't have the exemption, you were paying $1,543. If you did have the property tax exemption, you got a break. Okay, so let's assume that you did. Your total amount of your property tax for an average home in 2017, a year ago, would have been almost $5,100. Now that we are today with all of the changes that I mentioned during this presentation, if we just had the $20,000 tax exemption, the reduction in your tax bill would be $300. But we don't. We have a $50,000 property tax exemption. If you are a resident and you take advantage of that $50,000 property tax exemption, your tax bill last year with a $20,000 exemption would have been $5,100. Your tax bill this year with a $50,000 exemption is $4,800. So your savings on an average home, that's where I came up with that $273.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Dyson.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you giving us the figures for what are the homeowners. If you had a layout like this for businesses and commercial apartment houses, what would it look like?
So I'll get you. I will get you that information. I'm going to estimate the property tax. I don't want to guess. I had the number and I forgot.
Yeah, so
What is the number?
I'm certain that my colleagues got some of the same phone calls, but there was
So it'll go up what?
that we were doing a popular thing of tax relief for homeowners, but really sticking it to the commercial apartments. And businesses. And so I'm kind of anxious or interested in seeing that.
So I'm just talking to Marilyn, so the increase per 100,000 assessed value for commercial, or if you didn't have the exemption, basically wouldn't matter if it was commercial or a regular house without the exemption or rental property, it would go up $63 per 100,000. So it would go up about 180, 190 for 350 assessed valuation.
For commercial.
For commercial or residential, or anyone that doesn't have that residential exemption. So commercial, if you owned a home and you did not take advantage of the property tax exemption,
Yeah, I got
you would
that.
go up.
So all businesses pay the same mill rate as personal property or real property?
Your mill rate is based on your service area, not your property type.
Yeah, I once again forgive my ignorance. Thank you.
Go ahead, Lance.
One more question, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Constant.
So, in the last 6 months, probably the most heated topic that I had to deal with on taxes is the motor fuel tax, the gas tax. And the message that went out was that's going to help bring down people's property taxes.
Right.
And so where does that fit into this picture?
Excellent question, Member Constant. So when we were calculating and messaging the benefit of the fuel tax, which is true, and the residential, we were using that based on the 2018 approved budget. So if that was what we want to do, we were also basing it on, well, the gas tax was based not including the exemption. We didn't do the exemption until later. So when we build 1Q, the things that change are, do the total tax collections get modified? The total tax collections are going down. When we do the tax cap calculation, it's going from the total amount of tax collection is going from approved, when we were talking about all of this stuff, to now it's going down about $2 million just because of assessed valuation, MUSA. So at the time, if the settlements, if we didn't have any change in the settlements, there was no change in MUSA, MISA, there was no change in the assessed valuations, there was no change in any other element from the approved budget, those are true. But when you true up the information based on the assessed valuations and a variety of other things that we get after January 1, and frankly we didn't get these until earlier this month, that's what modifies the total amount on the bottom. It's not stagnant.
Yes, Eric.
Were you done, Chris?
I still don't kind of see where they go, but I guess it's just under the total collections. And I'll get more of it offline later.
Okay. And
Mr. Croft?
When does the 50,000 go into effect?
excellent. So if you had automatic, but two parts to that. If you have the $20,000, you automatically get 50, but you don't automatically get the exemption. You do have to apply for it.
I think you get a lot more appliers. There may be people who weren't, it wasn't worth it or didn't know about it at 20, and now we talked about it.
Yep.
Could you guys send out utility bills? Because there's still a lot of people that have lived here and have never put in for it because they didn't know it existed.
Right.
If you could get a hold of utilities to send out bills, put a notice in there, this is an exemption you qualify for, but this is what you have to do to get it.
It's not hard.
Would appreciate it. Yes, Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to make it 100% sure, if someone has already filed,
Yep.
and is getting the $20,000 exempted, they do not have to file additional paperwork to get the 50,000.
You are correct. You are correct.
But if they're not getting it now, they do have to file it.
Correct.
Okay.
So that's the reason we need to have help making sure we get the message out there to everybody.
Okay.
Go ahead, Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, something a little lighter. One of the things that we'll also have to you, and this is the item that we were not able to lay on the table, we're going to present to you a 1Q adjustment for the utilities. It will focus on AWU. We're recommending that we increase their expenditure authority by $800,000. They're going to use the revenue inside their own organization. They need to buy some materials and equipment for some materials for their treatment facilities. I think it's primarily a Girdwood and I know that they got some stuff out of Asplin. So we have to give them the authority to do it. This does not affect anything in general government. They're modifying it within their own. It doesn't affect the fund balance. It doesn't affect the tax cap. It doesn't affect anything in order to give them permission. And right now, we'll have no other proposed changes in any of the other areas. Thank you, Felix. So the last thing I just want to mention, Budget and Finance Committee is our next stop, which would be next, or I guess it's next Thursday, Mr. Chairman, if you guys are going to have that.
We're going to
and
have
if you
it.
need some information prior to, I believe you and Rose have scheduled a second work session to talk about amendments. Next Friday, we'll be here to help in any way we can. And I would ask, Mr. Chairman, if, and you can manage this however you want, but if you get proposed amendments and you can share them with us, then, you know, if we can figure out a way to, if there's a mechanism to do it, or at least be prepared to respond rather than us do that. Otherwise, you're going to give them to us on Friday. We'll have the weekend to figure out what we can or can't do. And then we'll have to do it on the
Well,
following
that's normally
Thursday.
the thing is we know what the fund balance is. So if they've got a project or something to put money towards, hey, the fund balance is this, how much should we reduce? Right now, we don't know what's in fund balance.
That's right. So if you want to add anything, we got to take something out or reduce
I
something.
want to make sure you understand that, because this is changing. In the past, we had money out there. You could say, this is how much money we got in fund balance. This is the impact. Now, like you said, you're going to have to say what you want to take out before you try and add something. Yes, Amy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions that I'm not sure you'll be able to answer for me, but maybe you can get back. Number one, we have significantly grown the police department, but we have not grown support staff significantly, specifically the dispatch. That's a major problem when you start realizing that's a core function so
Okay.
the police officers can do their thing. So I want to see, I don't see any addition for dispatchers in here. Is there any?
There is not.
I know that's a major problem with the
Okay.
police department. So I would like an administration response to see how you're going to deal with that. Because fundamentally, you can't just keep throwing officers on the street and not increase dispatch. Dispatch has been strained for years. And I think this is just frankly adding more cracks to the
I'll talk to the chief.
So I would like to see somebody do a real analysis of dispatch.
Okay.
The second thing I'd like to follow up on, one of those lawsuits that you talked about was at the fire department, one of the settlements. It was significant, and it was to the tune of $700,000, $800,000. And it was directly related to HR practices. In my understanding from talking to people, those practices have not changed. So fundamentally, we need to understand if we're setting ourselves up for this to be a continuing problem.
Okay.
So I don't expect that answer now, but just for you guys to look into it.
We will do that. Thank you.
Rose, would you tell Lisa we'd like to have a work session on litigation? Like half an hour. I'd like to know where we're at to this point in time in litigation. So if she can arrange half an hour for a work session, I'd appreciate it, Rose. Questions from some of the members for Lance? Yes, Suzanne?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So for items that were added into the budget to be funded with fund balance, are those in?
So the things that are added into the budget are as a result of when we did the tax cap calculation. There's the tax cap went up, and so the things that are added in here, the covers for the settlements, the coverage for the MUSA, all of those things are being as a result of the increase in the tax. The current taxing capacity, not as a result of savings that we had from 2017.
Suzanne, anything else?
Well, I think I am talking about something else, but items that we voted on in November, such as library hours, to be covered by fund balance, what is the status then, or how does that work?
So since they're not included for the library one, the library is not included. The intentions were that they would be funded once we knew 2017 would be closed. 2017 is not closed, so they're not included in here. So, and as I mentioned earlier, if that's something the Assembly wants to do as part of this process, is find something that the administration's proposed, reduce that for the amount for the library hours, and then add the library hours or whatever you would do. The alternative would be wait till 17 closes, fund the library, or wait till 17 closes, do a supplemental, and fund something that we have on here. We could do it either way.
I think second quarter budget revisions may give us some latitude to do that. Chris,
Just a
then.
quick follow-up on that. I think that, though, what you might be asking, if I might rephrase it a little bit, is that we did make some
We made some
approved
adjustments.
amendments.
Yeah, we did.
And we're funding them. The library is open now on Sundays and has been for the first quarter of the year.
Wait till, Lance?
I'm sorry,
He's
Mr.
got a
Chairman.
question.
To put a more fine point on, I think what she was asking was, we made some adjustments already at
Yes.
the year.
Yes.
And those were funded.
Yes.
Because we are operating the library now on Sundays, which
Correct.
we should continue to do, but separate from what we do from now forward.
Correct.
From January 1 till now, is that reflected in here?
It is.
And-
It is not.
Okay.
Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back to a little discussion about the 911 system.
Okay.
I was reading an email we got the other day that was stating that our current 911 system is over 30 years old. And I wasn't really aware of that. And so I'm wondering, are we planning to buy or build a new 911 system? Or do we think that the new 311 number might take some of the pressure off of the 911 system?
So, Assemblymember Peterson, I will follow up. I had a conversation with the chief yesterday. I know that they are currently updating the 911 system. I do not know when it will be done, but you are correct. Both police and fire are working to update. As a matter of fact, I think while they're updating the 911 system, they are operating out of the EOC while their current systems are being updated at APD headquarters and probably at Fire Station 12.
We're anticipating that it should be done by July.
July? Okay, thank you.
And Lance, I'm getting back to security for this place. I understand we added a security officer for the library because of all the thefts that are going on there. At least according to the security guard that works there. He said they've got an extra person now working security at the library.
Well, it would have been part of their approved budget. It's not something that we've included as part of this one.
Okay.
It was not a request from the library.
Okay. Other questions from assembly members? Anyway, if you've got some additions, figure out what you want to delete. So we don't know what fund balance is yet. And this is a schedule we've got that's on the back of this. This shows when we're going to have all this information for it. We're a Budget Finance Committee meeting on the April 19th, second work session with the sub-amendments. So that's how much time you have to work on your amendments and changes. And then April 24th, we have public hearing and approval. May 1st, then the treasurer sends mill rates out. It notifies everybody what their taxes are going to be. Then your phone will really go crazy. Yes, Chris?
There's this, separate from the content of the budget, Mr. Croft and I were having a conversation after the meeting last week. And we have kind of become accustomed to the practice of laying important items on the table at the last minute. And I know it was important to get it in, and I wouldn't lay blame on you guys. We have that practice too. But we've been engaging in a conversation about how do we tighten up the process so that the public is adequately noticed about matters that are important to them. And it's a conversation, I'm not sure where it's going to go, but it's definitely underway in some corners that we should probably come up with some better customs for items of significance that are, I voted on an item to be introduced that I hadn't seen or read, right, at the meeting on Tuesday. It was handed out in the electronic binder kind of as the vote was taking place, and that was incredibly uncomfortable. And again, I don't point at you guys for that. I see it happen on our side too. But it's a breakdown in the system.
Yes, Dean.
I wanted to just shortly address that question about the process for agenda items, laying table items, and its accessibility to the public. I've been in a discussion in spoke groups about how we can improve that process in response to concerns that you, Mr. Croft, about the rules. So we'll try to get a response to you soon and have some change in place for the 24th meeting.
Yeah, just following up, I know we didn't take action on it, but to the public, it would have been completely transparent that the entire budget, the mill rate, and the ASD budget was in effect in its first reading. It wasn't on the agenda. It wasn't, and it just came in our packet afterwards. And again, an unaction was taken. We did it in first reading. And something, anything, but particularly something that's significant, if I were a watcher, I wouldn't have known that the budget was presented then. I wouldn't have had any way to know. And the more significant action is coming up when we amend and adopt it. But it's not a trivial thing when it comes on board. I mean, that's why we require first or second or sometimes third readings, is for public notice. And it essentially didn't have one if you're watching from the sidelines, or you wouldn't have known that. They'll know the next one, but I don't think it's good practice.
Can I make a comment on that, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Lance.
I think one of the things that that we did last year that we didn't do this year that I thought was a little better process, and we were just in a situation where we were trying to get the best information at the last minute, so we didn't have to change it too much. But one of the things that we did last year is we had this presentation prior to it being laid on the table or as an addendum item. So there was information available at this level without a lot of detail, and I think in the future we can do that and give you sort of a high-level overview, assuming that we have all of that information. And then when it is, because this administration, previous administrations, in my experience, it's typically an addendum item, and so it's put on as an addendum, but a presentation prior to you seeing it so you're aware of what's going on. Obviously, people get a little bit to know where the direction is, and then give you the details. So we'll work to make that a better process.
Any other questions for Lance? Anyone else? Chris?
Restate that my point wasn't to point at you. It's we have this custom that we have begun kind of doing this dance pretty frequently. So I really wasn't pointing. This was just a really crystalline example.
Okay.
Normally, we don't do this process, but yes, you're right. There's something we need to have just by name only being introduced. It's not the way we normally do business. I like the way we did it last year. We knew ahead of time what was coming forward to us. But I think with SAP coming on, that's part of the problem, is trying to get information out of there. Even give us what we've got now was a problem.
So, always looking to improve.
Yes, sir. Mr. Dyson. Rose.
Go ahead, Mr. Dyson. I can, Lance, and I don't mean to reiterate this question, it's been asked twice already, but the assembly amendments that were part of the approved budget in the 2018 budget in November.
Approved.
Some of those were funded with fund balance.
Yes.
Are those items included in this budget?
They're funded.
They are funded?
Yep.
Okay.
As I remember, one of the things that you wanted to do is, for example, libraries.
Yes.
Libraries were only half a year, not a whole year. Right? So the rest of the half a year are not there because we don't know what 17 is going to close, because that was your intentions.
But those amendments are funded and included in this budget?
The original ones, yes.
The approved
Yes.
2018.
Yes.
Thank you.
The ones you're concerned about, Suzanne, are funded.
Thank you, Rose.
But not for the whole year?
They're funded as they were passed.
Correct.
As
Funded
the
as-
amendments.
Right.
Les, would you take a look whether they're funded for the whole year or half year?
The
And
library?
give us an email, yes.
Yep.
Because Suzanne cares about, wants to know. So if you'd find that out for us and send it to us,
Absolutely.
we appreciate it. Mr. Dyson?
I think Chris raised a good point. I think my first assembly meeting, we were making a substantive change in a piece before us. And wait a minute, we ought to let the guys who are affected by it get a chance to weigh in on it. I would suggest that it is part of our job to be a pretty good watchdog and look out for the interests of constituents. If you think about having a policy that said something's laid on the table, and if any of us object to it going forward that fast, that one or more of us objected, so on. And if anybody objects, it takes a supermajority to overrule and go forward, something like that. We're not the only formal body that's wrestling those kind of things.
We'll take a look at that, Fred. Thank you. It's a good
Yeah,
idea.
we went into another thing that we've been working on. It's mainly, about our procedures. We do I think they ought to be addendums. And we ought to have rules that say, is it an appropriate thing to add to our agenda? Has it been noticed? Or is there some emergency that means it has to be done now? If not, we're putting it off to the next meeting. So tell me, and so things that come in the addendum are like additional materials on something that's already been noticed. Well, that's okay. So another community council opining on an alcohol license was noticed. But a true thing that was not on our agenda, I think we should have some very specific, why should we make an exception here? And if it can't meet it, put it out.
Yep.
We've tried to reduce the addendum agenda down. We've done that significantly over the years. But in this case, like I said, with the SAP, it was just a problem.
Yep.
Okay.
So,
I'll look at that.
thanks for being here. This work session is done with.